Earlier in the week, Legend Story Studios released a new scheduled banned and suspended announcement. Now, I'm a little bit behind the ball, but the reason for that is today, the 5th, is when a lot of these changes actually come into play. So again, I'm not really part of the competitive scene. So for instance, Classic Constructed and there being no changes to discuss, we're probably just going to skip over that. That said, there was a wonderful breakdown of what happened at the Baltimore tournament onto Blitz. So the following heroes have obtained Living Legend status and are no longer legal for official Blitz tournament play as of the 5th. So what does this mean? Well, they're banned. That's essentially what that means. Both Isylander and Oldhim are banned from competitive Blitz play, and all the cards connected to them are therefore banned. That is the easiest interpretation of this. But it gets a bit more insane when you start thinking and digging. Oldhim, Isylander, and Lexi all have access to ice cards. So 2/3 of the heroes that can generate Frostbite are now banned. Now, Frostbite dominated Blitz because Blitz is a quicker paced game, and the simple fact that you are frostbiting your opponent and slowing them down immensely really helps tilt things in your favor. So the fact that both of them are banned, because again, I don't believe there are many Lexi style decks that run Frostbite or Frostbite in a huge amount. They focus more on the lightning side of her elements. It's essentially as though Frostbite has been removed from Blitz. And then if we take a look at the Living Legend status board, so the amount of points everyone is accruing and how close they are to actually being banned, in Classic Constructed, Oldhim and Isylander are ranked 2nd and 3rd. Now, Isylander didn't see any play at Baltimore, only Oldhim and Dash actually received points in Classic Constructed, but Oldhim is fairly close to being banned in Classic Constructed. Okay, if Isylander joins him, if both Oldhim and Isylander are banned in both formats, that's going to have a pretty radical effect on the collectability of their pools of cards. And this sort of brings me back to what I discussed in my other video on collectability, the fact that the playability and the state of play of Flesh and Blood has such a dramatic effect on the collectible side of things. We can talk about Prism. So Prism is getting a reprint, even Chain is getting a successor, so that Shadow Runeblade and Light Illusionist are back in action and all those cards are now usable again. But does this mean that, this guarantees that the next set will have to feature Isylander and Oldhim, or a new Elemental Guardian and a new Elemental Wizard? Again, they don't have to share the same attributes, but they do need that Elemental tag because, again, all Elemental Guardian cards are now obsolete. All Elemental Wizard cards are obsolete. It's very interesting in that regard because it's essentially backing Legend Story Studios into a corner where they will have to predict and develop sets for the heroes that achieve Living Legend status. Again, without Dusk Till Dawn, there is a whole section of cards that only Prism can use and are therefore not desired by a large number of players because they can't be used. Because again, the competitive scene does really affect the collectability of Flesh and Blood more so than most other TCGs, because it is the literal backbone of the game. Okay, it's just grown so drastically. It's very healthy to see, but it does create this sort of problem with Living Legend, and depending on what heroes are banned, especially if they do get banned in both formats. In terms of game design and development, we're seeing this mechanism where each hero is expanded upon with these special variations. So for the majority of heroes, we have, 2 variants of a standard version. So for instance, Assassin, we have Arachne, and then of course Uzari. And then Ninja, you've got Benji, Katsu, Ira, the majority of which are also restricted to Blitz for the most part. So only a few heroes have both adult and Blitz versions. So if you look at Classic Constructed, there's obviously a smaller pool of heroes. So anytime any of these heroes is removed from legality in terms of the competitive scene, a huge number of cards go with them. Because again, Prism is the only light illusionist. That's why it's so critical that there is a reprinting or a new version in Dusk Till Dawn. So then if Oldhim is eventually removed from both Classic Constructed and Blitz, it's 1/2 of all the heroes that can utilize Earth, it's 1/3 of all the heroes that can utilize Ice, And then it's also all Elemental Guardian cards removed from playability. And this is something that really will need to be kept in check eventually, because as we continue to expand horizontally, so rather than just reprinting, another assassin, another ranger, another guardian, we get these extra little tags that then, make these specialized pulls. Now, obviously Bravo is also an elemental guardian, but he's already banned. He was very quick to the ban. So yeah, there is no more elemental guardians. There is no more elemental wizards in Blitz, and it's very, very close to losing out in Classic Constructed, and it'll be a huge hit to the cards. In all honesty, I don't want to see Legend Story Studios go down this road of all their future sets being dictated by the Living Legend status. While I do love the Living Legend status, and I think it's a cool way to handle, the competitive scene and banning and keeping things fresh without a rotation, if you will, the issue is if they continue going into this design space, again, of this horizontal development, then we're going to have issues where, certain cards will require reprints or new versions, in order for these massive card pools to still be accessible. Because again, the fact that all Elemental Guardian cards are very, very close to being completely gone in the competitive scene is a big thing for the community and for the collectible nature of Flesh and Blood. And then the last thing to talk about is, of course, the other cards that were moved from banned to legal. So Drone of Brutality, Aether Icevein, Crown of Seeds, and Hypothermia, as well as what this does for the overall state. So the fact that Isylander and Oldhim are both banned, these were very control-heavy, slow decks. Blitz play should hopefully regain a lot of tempo decks and mid-range decks, therefore allowing Drone of Brutality to be utilized more so as a temporary save, rather than the clutch and inevitable recycle card till you win. Because that is the big thing with Drone of Brutality, is rather than being, say, on hit or on pitch, it has this single clause, which is if it would be put into the graveyard from anywhere, it's put to the bottom of your deck. So if you have two of them, or even one and another card to pitch, you can endlessly use Drone of Brutality every round. So if you just fatigue your opponent out, you will eventually win, because Drone of Brutality will outclass any damage you can get from weapons. So it'll be very interesting to see the new decks that sort of arise from this, as well as whether or not, maybe Lexi or Briar can make use of Crown of Seeds and Aether Icevein / Hypothermia. I would like to see a control style Lexi deck. That would be interesting. Maybe not in Blitz. There probably is in saying that, because again, I don't know too many decks, so sorry if I'm wrong, and there is already a control style Lexi deck. But yeah, Lexi is the only hero left to utilize Frostbite. I think overall it was a smart move in terms of the playing scene, because the few times I have tried to make tempo or combo decks, I instantly lose to any Frostbite. It just is very diminishing in Blitz when Blitz is, meant to be somewhat of a quick format. There's also this last line, so they're going to keep an eye on Drone of Brutality, and if need be, ban it again. At that point, I would like to see erratas more than bans. Because again, if Drone of Brutality is just changed to be, if this hits, for instance, as probably the most drastic change, then, it would work. This statement, where regardless of how it ends up in your graveyard, it's recycled, is pretty much the issue when it comes to resource management, because that's the big thing in Flesh and Blood, managing your cards. And then we also have a banning of Go Bananas in official events when it comes to multiplayer. So this is also a good thing. You can definitely see that in terms of terminology. They were very much more loose in the early days. So for instance, you've got Drone of Brutality, you have the Vest of the First Fist, which is worded somewhat uniquely, and of course Go Bananas. And it's good to see refinement. There's still always room for wacky cards. But overall, I think good choices. Interesting to see what it does to the state of the market, and a fair warning that the Living Legend status will probably end up really dictating, what future sets are, because wherever the card pools are restricted because of banned heroes, we'll see new development and new growth, rather than, fresh design. Eventually, the horizontal growth in terms of hero development will catch up, because they just won't be able to support the ginormous amount of specialized heroes. So, what could be the solution? Perhaps another increase to the living legend point totals. So, for instance, decreasing how much they get per competition or increasing the amount of points needed to achieve the living legend status. Or perhaps, smaller reprints that are put in. Because again, all that needs to be done is for there to be a version of this hero in a new set. Okay? The set doesn't have to focus on them. If any version of Oldhim, be it an Elemental Guardian, is reprinted as a young hero, then all of a sudden all those cards come back into playability. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Tell me your thoughts. Yeah.